So first of all, welcome on behalf of Kemp, the Centre of Excellence in Media Practice, to fabulous book launch. I'm going to read the title because I don't want to trip up over it. Action Heroines of the 21st Century, Sisters in Arms. We've just been having a discussion about the cover, which we think is fabulous, and I've now got a film we need to go and watch. So thank you for that. It's published by EUP, who I've just heard are a very, very good publisher. So actually pay some attention to what you're doing, which isn't always the case, and are very supportive. So yeah, this is the book launch, and I'm going to start by throwing things over to Krista van Ralt, who is who's from Bournemouth University. Is the head of the Centre for Excellence in Media Practice, and also to Fran Pheasant-Kelly, who is, if I've got this right, you're a reader in Screen Studies at University of Wolverhampton, and you're the co-director of the International Centre for Creative Industries. And I think I've got that right. Yeah, great. Yeah. So yeah, throw over to you two who are the editors of the edition to talk us through things.
Thank you. So big welcome to everyone, and thanks to the contributors, and thanks for people for coming. And I'm just going to give you a bit of a rundown of where we started. Yeah, so it was sometime during the 2021 COVID lockdown that Krista contacted me and asked me if I was interested in co-organising a conference on action heroines, to which I readily agreed. The resultant collection, therefore, had its genesis at an important moment for many of the contributors here today. It was the first face-to-face conference for most of us in the wake of COVID. In the event, most of us went down with COVID shortly after, but agreed unanimously that it had been the best way to catch it. And so, in June 2022, just over 3 years ago, Action Heroines in the 21st century started to take shape. We had contributors from all over the world, from India and the US to Poland, France and Sweden, and soon realised that the phenomenon of women acting collectively was pretty much global in terms of representation on screen. We felt that this reflected some of the real world events that had emerged over the past few decades in terms of violence towards women, especially relating to fourth wave feminism. And this formed the backbone of our collection, which ultimately became 16 chapters over 342 pages. And I'm going to hand over to Krista now to expand on that a bit.
Okay, thanks, Fran. So a little bit about the rationale for this volume. The action heroine, I would argue, presents an existential threat to a patriarchal world, or not necessarily through her engagement in violence per se, which is important, but because her capacity for violent action can be seen as the visual and symbolic expression of agency, of her ability to act in and on the world in these genres of films and television. So it's not surprising that despite the prominence in critical discourse of a few high-profile examples, she is actually still a relatively scarce figure in a typically male-dominated action genres. And where she does appear, it is predominantly as a single exceptional woman amid a cast of men. Her very exceptionality, the sense that she is somehow the exception that proves the rule, if you like, is one of a number of textual strategies that serve to limit and dilute the disruptive potential of the action heroine. The presence of multiple female characters in these texts then not only lifts the burden of representation, offering a range of identities, and as Amanda Lotz puts it, making stereotypes uninhabitable, by normalising female action, rendering it powerful rather than pathological, the presence of multiple women in these texts serves to redefine the action genre itself. So we're lucky enough to assembled almost all of our contributors here today to give a very brief insight into some of the individual chapters that make up the collection, beginning with Alicia.
Hi, hello, can you hear me? Yes, okay. So thank you for the introduction, and let me move on right away to tell you what my chapter is about, if I'm to squeeze in 2 minutes. So Essentially, my chapter is grounded in the assumption that regardless of the ascribed type of agency, action heroines tend to be seen as agents endowed with highly individualized selves. That is, strong egos, as if sculpted to be detached from the world, to be able to go against. There is social connectedness, sense of collectivity, and most importantly, the question of how their sense of collectivity shapes their agency tends to be brushed over. Various texts, films, and television series working with the Sister in Arms Convention thus provide a perfect ground on which to explore this issue, as they often portrayed highly individual selves acting in situation of social connectedness. And one such example of my interest in this chapter is the Rookie History and Heroine television series, which, surprise, surprise, tells the story of Go Heroine and her sister in arms, both trying to survive and to find their place at a highly patriarchal and cutthroat court of the Joseon dynasty in the early 19th century, which is more or less like modern day in Korea. In my chapter, I focus on the key protagonist of the series and her sisters in arms to analyze the dynamic in which she enters with them, to show that collectivity functions in this case as a tool facilitating her ages. To be able to do this, I ground my arguments in Kenneth Gergen's theory of the relational self, actually, and more precisely in his repertoire of discursive resources, on which the self draws to act in social situations. Hence, in the first part of my chapter, I briefly introduce the series and explain how I apply Gergen's ideas to its analysis. Then I analyze the mentioned dynamic with respect to two sentences, okay? How Go Heroine's sense of collectivity informs her self-shaping, that is how engaging in collective actions grounded in care, duty, and trust make her more effective, thoughtful, and strategic. Okay, thank you.
So as you can see, my chapter is about Westerns. So tough, independent women have always played and continue to play central roles in Westerns, ranging from Jessica Drummond in 40 Guns through to Mattie Ross in True Grit. However, the 21st century has witnessed the production of numerous productions that further challenge the Westerns traditions in terms of gender representation. Here, in the genre perhaps most associated with displays of violent masculinity, groups of women are increasingly taking centre ground. Even though groups of women not conforming to the usual saloon bar stereotypes are evident in a number of classical Westerns, including, for example, Delma Dave's 3:10 to Yuma, few productions feature women collectives as central to the narrative. Peter Evans notes an early exception to this in Westward the Women. However, recent films such as The Missing, The Keeping Room, and Netflix series Godless focus on women operating together to resist violence inflicted by men. Such content corresponds with the agency of real-world cases, whereby women increasingly act collectively. Engaging theoretically with feminist and post-feminist scholarship, particularly as it relates to the Western, my chapter then argues that female agency and sisterhood are establishing new patterns in the genre and identifies the revised conventions and codes of the feminist 21st century Western. Thank you.
Aha, no need to ding.
Okay, so this is my chapter and I'm just giving a brief. India is not just one of the largest producers of films, but it also has one of the largest young populations consuming mainstream cinema and digital content. Through the decades of Indian cinema, the heroine has signified the tensions between tradition and modernity while navigating the challenges of her personal circumstances. Anger and violence, if demonstrated, were the prerogative of her male counterpart, while she was entrusted with bringing balance and harmony to the world of the story, often sacrificing herself. A shift from escapism to content-driven films came about as a result of the paradigm shift in the Indian economy and society triggered in the 1990s by economic liberalization and globalization, the arrival of satellite television, etc. While the action genre has not been the dominant mode in women-centric films in India, the placement of the angry young women in this film that I've investigated, called Gulab Gang, is situated within the larger discourse of women empowerment. The contours of these angry young women are connected to new Bollywood's fresh engagement with social and political issue-based content based on hinterland India. This chapter identifies how action sequences align with the star image of the actors in Gulab Gang. It draws parallels between the performance of the female lead with those of their equivalents in male-led films. The research heavily borrows from Laura Canning's idea of the smart film. Smart cinema, though it is produced within a structured system of creating content for the mainstream and mass audiences, also establishes or aligns itself with artistic sensibility of art house cinema for niche spectators. Thus, Canning describes these films as having an economy of prestige. In chiming with Canning's description, Gulab Gang employs a low-budget indie filmmaking aesthetic combined with a cinematic sensibility with mainstream production viability and publicity. Rural India has faced a lot of problems. This is my last sentence. And Mufassil India is showcased in this film as unruly, violent. Gulab Gang offers to the contemporary Bollywood spectator a combination of gangs, violence, and justice with an intent to showcase female vigilantes and agency located in a hinterland village. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go if no one says they can't hear me. So my chapter concerns a shift in the traditional association between women and nature as seen on screen, and namely it focuses on the appearance of a more radical action heroine, which I think is appropriate to our moment of ecological crisis. It focuses on Erlingson's 2018 Icelandic film Women at War and offers a close examination of the central character Halla. It posits she is radical for various reasons, a key one being the tension and ultimate reconciliation between extreme activism and motherhood. So Halla is on the one hand a fierce mountain woman and on the other a mild-mannered choir conductor who yearns for a child. So as such, the chapter considers Halla's presentation in extraordinary action heroine terms, the stunt sequences recalling athletic capabilities of Hollywood action heroes, but it also considers the moments of intimacy within the smaller worlds of Halla's domestic life. The chapter then moves to consider how Halla's endeavours, the environmentalism and motherhood, are seemingly set up as solo efforts highlighted in the singular noun of the film's title, but are in fact dependent on a whole host of support systems. In this way, that lone woman trope of the female-centred action film is complicated. That Halla requires assistance and accomplices in her pursuits is signalled early on by an exchange with a sheep farmer named Schwenborn, and you can see that on the slide there, that she says she's on her own, but then very quickly it moves to, well, she needs an accomplice. The chapter frames Halla's development of such networks as an example of Donna Haraway's notion of making kin, not least because it features something other or more than entities tied by ancestry or genealogy, including those that are non-human. The film's redefinition of family extends to Halla's route to motherhood via adoption. But the chapter does admit the importance of a more traditional familial bond with the identical twin sister, a character required for Halla to achieve success in the domain of motherhood by the film's end. And as a final move, the chapter considers how the messaging of the film extends outwards towards the audience. So the eco-activism is not just consigned to the heroine on screen, but the audience of it, i.e. that we are invited to be Halla's sisters in arms.
All right, midway through the 2019 film remake of the iconic and controversial 1970s television series Charlie's Angels, Sabina, played by Kristen Stewart, and Jane, played by Ella Balinski, who are in the bottom image, bring Elena, played by Naomi Scott, a whistleblowing tech programmer, under their protection to the closet, two adjoining rooms in the Townsend Agency's Berlin outpost, which is seen in the above image. As Elena admires the bounty of designer clothes and shoes, Boz, aka Bosley, who is played by Elizabeth Banks, who is also the film's director, descends into the room remarking, we're still in the first closet. To Elena's delighted astonishment, Boz then reveals a second closet, an armory full of advanced weaponry and spy gear. Drawing attention away from one closet full of clothes to the other full of weapons and technology echoes the film's attempts to address several salient sticking points from earlier iterations on television and film. Considering the second closet as both a real space within the film and a metaphor, my chapter for this collection interrogates the two juxtaposed conditions upon which the premise of the 2019 film rests. On the one hand, the liberatory potential of the angels' communal power structure challenges past conventions of action heroines as standalones who are ostensibly not like other women. On the other hand, the insistence on femininity as the font of the angels' power also begets a risk that the entire enterprise might destabilize under the weight of assumptions about gendered norms that continually haunt popular narratives of women's empowerment. From its inception, Charlie's Angels has featured 3 women who work for a private detective agency and use their preternatural skills to solve crimes that require techniques or skills that are, for various reasons, inaccessible to male investigators. While the blueprint has not changed, the ways in which 2019's Charlie's Angels enacts this formula speaks to an endemic issue with women's empowerment in visual narrative media along the intersecting axes of femininity and power.
Over to you, Laura.
Right, thank you. So for the historical context, the Marvel series Agent Carter launches Peggy Carter, a wartime combatant with a special operations executive, into a post-war world that relegates her to secretarial duties at the Strategic Scientific Reserve, despite her exceptional skills. The core question is, how does Peggy navigate and manipulate traditional femininity, appearance, behavior, and costumes to assert agency within a male-dominated intelligence agency? I show how Peggy and her 2 main foils, Dottie Underwood, a Black Widow assassin, and Whitney Frost, a brilliant scientist hiding her true identity as a famous actress, each adopt, subvert, or reject stylized femininity to conceal their true power. Peggy's invisibility within the SSR bureaucratic culture enables her covert investigations. This paradox, being overlooked because she's just a woman, becomes her greatest advantage. Through close readings of pivotal scenes, example, Peggy storming the men's locker room before a mission, Dottie's hyperfemininity masking her lethal intent, Whitney's fractured mask of glamour as she accesses black power, the chapter argues for a multiplicity of female subject positions beyond the camp binaries of seductress versus martyr. Finally, I trace Peggy's later Marvel Cinematic Universe returns in the limited animated series Marvel's What If and the film Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, to demonstrate how these texts too often reinscribe her into familiar patriarchal tropes, erasing the nuanced feminist interventions of the TV series. Today's blockbuster landscape, whether it's Black Widow, The Woman King, or new streaming series, demands more sophisticated portrayals of women in combat roles. By revealing how performance, costume, and genre conventions intersect, the chapter offers a roadmap for critics and creators to understand and advance feminist representations in action and superhero media. In sum, this chapter argues that Agent Carter not only challenges mid-century gender norms, but provides critical insights for how modern action films can depict women's power as both performative and deeply agentive. Thank you.
Yeah, in this chapter, I analyzed an unfinished and ambivalent gender revolution. From a feminist perspective, female police characters are particularly powerful and symbolic because they are law enforcers, legally authorized to use firearms and violence. As such, they challenge a long-standing male monopoly of legitimate violence. Firstly, since the turn of the century, police women characters are more numerous than ever before. For at least the last decade, they haven't even needed to be legitimized by the presence of male colleagues. They fight, they carry and shoot the same firearms as their male counterparts, which, if you consider the work of Paula Tabet, is really an anthropological revolution. Historically, men managed to keep the most powerful weapons for themselves, which is no longer the case. But at the same time, these women are mostly young and slim, and they are highly eroticized in various cumulative ways. High heels, cleavage, loose long hair, nudity. Ultimately, these characters are very ambiguous. It seems they are still required to give pledges to the patriarchal order, while undermining it at the very same time? Thank you.
So my chapter deals with Terminator Dark Fate, which was directed by Tim Miller and released in 2019. Terminator Dark Fate is the 6th installment of the Terminator franchise. It saw the return of Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor and that of Arnold Schwarzenegger as the T-800. Yet it also marked a shift in the franchise by featuring a team of women who fight together, as you can see in the poster. What is new and striking in the latest Terminator release is that, spoiler alert, John Connor dies at the very beginning of the film, so that the film features only women protagonists for half of its duration. Terminator Dark Fate testifies to a major evolution in the action and science fiction genres, since it includes 3 female characters: Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton, Grace, played by Mackenzie Davis, and Danny, played by Natalia Reyes. 3 female characters who are not sidekicks nor love interests, but action heroines in their own right, and who act as a team. In my chapter, I argue that the film's emphasis on the building of a female team bound by mentoring and care is an exceptional occurrence in science fiction action films. But at the same time, Terminator Dark Fate maintains a racial and gendered hierarchy, which places white saviors at the top and the brown-skinned damsel at the bottom. I focus first on the evolution of Sarah Connor from mother to mentor. Then I examine the diverse team formed by the 3 women. And finally, I demonstrate that racial inequalities persist in a film that cannot help but glorify the white male action hero embodied by the T-800.
Thank you. Right. It's me. So my chapter explores constructions of female mentorship in 3 Hollywood films. Charlie's Angels, the same one as we've just heard about. The Old God, which Deborah's going to talk about, and Mulan, the live action Mulan, that is. All of which, incidentally, have female directors, which may be quite important. The mentor-rookie relationship is quite a common trope in male-led action, and it's not unusual in female-led action. However, mentors in that case are almost exclusively male, reinforcing a sense of the woman as an exception again and contained within a wider patriarchal project. Where Hollywood films do explore the relationship between an older and a younger woman, it's more likely to be represented in terms of jealous rivalry, drawing on variations of the traditional wicked stepmother trope, or a sort of inverted version of that we get in All About Eve. These 3 films, in their very different ways, break that mould. In the chapter, I draw on Margaret Moginoth-Gillette's work to analyse the mentoring relationship they represent. Old Guard offers a version of the conventional mentor-rookie structure, with the initial antagonism between world-weary leader Andy and Niall, the reluctant recruit, turning gradually to mutual respect. Charlie's Angels very deliberately plays with our gendered assumptions, setting up both the angels and the audience to read the mature woman, the leader Boz, played by Elizabeth Banks, the director, as potentially treacherous, rather than, spoiler alert, the benevolent mentor she really is. Mulan initially presents the older woman, the witch Shan Yang, as our heroine's primary antagonist. Yet she becomes increasingly instrumental in helping Mulan to find her true strength and thus to triumph, despite the attitudes of the men who are supposed to be on her side. I argue that by offering a positive alternative to the persistently negative archetypes that otherwise dominate representations of the intergenerational relationships between women, the mentor's role is critical to realizing the feminist potential of these texts.
It's me. This is about 2 movies, Captain Marvel, which is the 21st movie in the Marvel big tentpole gigantic juggernaut that is the Marvel movie series, but the first one to be helmed by a woman, and unsurprisingly helmed by a white, blonde, conventionally attractive woman. Maria Rambeau is her sidekick, and the other movie is The Harder They Fall, which does grace the cover of the book, a still from that. And I'm looking at the character played by Danielle Deadweiler of Cuffy, who you see in the brimmed hat there. So that movie is actually, so these two characters are both sidekick characters rather than the main protagonist, and that is a pattern which across Hollywood, I think Yvonne Tasker says, very rarely, although blackness is very central to the action genre in Hollywood, very rarely do black characters get to be the protagonists, whatever their gender or sexuality. But the black queer action heroine is definitely an outsider's outsider. So I looked at these two films thinking about sisterhood in three different ways. Bell Hooks's black feminist notion of sisterhood as political solidarity between women, Adrienne Rich's lesbian continuum, which is useful because actually in terms of reading the character as queer, she's queer coded rather than overtly queer in the movie. And finally, a scholar called Amber Musa, who's written an interesting book about black jouissance, and that sisterhood is the sisterhood between black actors and their characters, because very rarely in blockbuster movies do black actresses get to work with directors or writers or producers who are themselves black. So an additional solidarity. Some of the interviews that these actors talk about, the sense of solidarity that they feel with their characters. So three kinds of sisterhood in these movies, and yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Yeah, so to start by saying a brief thank you to Krista and Fran for being such attentive and supportive editors. But I'd also like to say quickly a thank you to colleagues at the Black Film Centre and Archive in the US, housed at the Indiana University in Bloomington, where I was hugely fortunate to conduct some of this research. And I do this especially at a time when more than ever we need to be using and supporting the incredibly important work that they do and house their championing and centering Black filmmakers and scholars. So essentially, this chapter looks at how the 2020 Netflix release of The Old Guard, adapted from a graphic novel of the same name, about a group of immortal warriors trying to fight for good in the world, might signal some newly hopeful possibilities for the action genre. So directed by a Black woman filmmaker, Gina Prince-Bythewood, she spoke about how going into the film, she felt that the genre had become stale and saw a chance to rethink and revitalise it here. And more specifically, when asked by the New York Times what she thought she could bring to the story, she answered, the opportunity to put a young Black female hero into the world. For this is a film, as we've heard, in which established aging white action megastar Charlize Theron is in fact saved by, and certainly prepares to hand the reins of leadership, it would seem, over to a young Black woman, Kiki Layne, played by Kiki Layne. So I was interested in examining both what makes this a really satisfying, skillful, cinematically bold, big action movie, and also at the same time, an unusually reflective, diverse and inclusive one, in which, as one review put it, the heroes are women, men, Black, white, queer, straight, Muslim and Christian. In achieving this, alongside remarkable viewing figures, the film suggests what might become possible when more diverse filmmakers are themselves given the reins, and a big budget too. My essay comes with an important caveat though. By the time I was finishing it, Prince-Bythewood's next film, The Woman King, also with a Black woman star taking the action helm, had been completely ignored at the Academy Awards. A powerful reminder we can't for 1 minute begin to feel complacent, even when a film like The Old Guard shows us just what a more inclusive mainstream cinema might look like.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of our chapter presentations. Thank you so much, everybody. My little role here is, to do the plug. For anybody who would like to read any of those chapters, do encourage your library. There's a code there, 30% off code. Do encourage your library to order the book. By all means, buy it yourself. It is about 115 quid. But that's my little plug. Well, Ashley, over to you to sort of coordinate a little bit of discussion, I guess.
Were there any questions? I was keeping. There weren't any drops in the chat unless I missed them. Forgive me. Were there any questions that anyone had for any of the contributors or other contributors? Vincent, you've got your hand up. I think your first hand up. So over to you, Vincent.
Hello. Am I coming through?
You are.
Excellent. Good. Hello. Thanks so much for this. Well, to Krista and Fran for putting this collection together, and for the brilliant summaries that folks have given today about the chapters. This is a general question for anybody who'd like to answer it amongst the contributors. And it relates to a claim I've heard, I don't entirely agree with, but a claim that previous iconic action heroines like Ripley and Sarah Connor could be described as effectively fulfilling male roles and so are effectively in drag. So my question is, do you think this claim could also be made about 21st century action heroes? If so, how? And if not, why not?
Okay, anyone happy to pick that question up?
I'll give it a bash to start off with. I think that comes back to this multiplicity thing again. I mean, those arguments about is it drag or is it something else, I mean, they go round and round. I think it's important to pay attention to them, you know, the idea of masculinity and so forth. But again, it's much easier to make that argument about a single exceptional woman in a world of men. It's much more difficult to make that argument when you're looking at the likes of, whether it's Charlie's Angels, which, let's face it, is hardly, you know, a sort of, you know, feminist behemoth, but in something like Old Guard, becomes very difficult to make that argument. I would suggest that if anybody wants to tag team on that.
So maybe I can jump in since my chapter deals with Sarah Connor. Well, I mean, I find the argument relatively questionable, even for the 20th century. And I would argue that it's even more questionable in the 21st century. As Krista was saying, definitely it's an argument that's difficult to make when there's a team of women. And in a way, I would say that it's quite difficult to make for Terminator Dark Fate, the 6th installment, because there is really a sense of sisterhood that is insisted upon, and that is linked to being a woman. With even though Sarah Connor is no longer a mother in Dark Fate, she becomes a female mentor, and it's important. And the fact that she is a woman does appear to be important in passing the baton to Danny. So even though motherhood is erased, so kind of the biological element of that is essential to being a woman is erased, the fact of being a woman still remains important in Dark Fate in the context of functioning as a team of women.
Cool, thank you. Anyone else got a thought or a question they'd like to throw into the mix, or a question they had from one of the other contributors? I'm assuming that some of the contributors haven't actually met each other. Oh, Deborah, brilliant.
Yeah, hi, Ashley. I just thought I might add as a sort of counterpoint to that, because one of the other things that's often said as well is that women are just fetishized in the action genre. And I'm sure, Krista, you came across this when you were looking at the Old Guard, but one of the things I thought was really important and interesting there was how Gina Prince-Bythewood was speaking about how she really wanted to have like her women stars fight in this film because it's an action movie, but was really careful to choreograph it in a way which couldn't be perceived as a cat fight and which couldn't be conceived as fetishizing them, and was all about sort of showing their skillfulness and their athleticism. Anyway, I just think that's a kind of useful counterpoint as well to the idea, like, oh, they're either going to be like seen as, you know, masculinized or fetishized, like what else might be going on and what else might be possible.
Thank you. Anyone else with a thought or a a further question that they'd like to throw into the mix? Or anything they didn't quite get to, wanted to... oh, no, Matthew, over to you.
In a wake of the previous interventions, either the female police characters that I study or a character like that of Sarah Connor or others are women who learn how to be warriors. They learn techniques if they are in the police forces, etc. And it means a lot because it means that fighting is something you learn, and it's not an innate, a natural male quality. And from this point of view, any female action character cannot be thought as a main character in drag, from my point of view.
I just wondered, Gary, if you wanted to chip in on this, because I think it's really striking that in a lot of Western movies, female fighters are dressed in quite masculine costume. But of course, that's not at all the case in Gulag Gang. Is there anything you want to add on that?
Thank you, Krista. There's a lot going on in my mind. So what's interesting is that in the Indian context, we imagine, one of the imaginations is not male, female, but masculinity and femininity. So even the Lord Shiv is described as Ardhanarishwar, which means half man, half woman. And, protecting yourself comes very naturally within the pedestalization of God and goddesses and etc., etc. So it's really interesting how the current rendition is more of a Western stance where sometimes the stars do a mock male. So I'll call it quote unquote mock male, and probably also this term called quasi-empowered, because they are not right there. They're somewhere in the middle where they have the masculine performance while at the end of the day, they are protecting the feminine identity. And in Gulag Gang, what's also very interesting, which I don't know if it came across, but there is this woman is not fighting another man. This is, she's the male the antagonist is another female, and she is as complex and as slimy as a male villain, quote unquote, in a masala film can be. So, somebody said drag, if I understood it correctly. But what if the cultures have drag as part of performance in their traditional stories? What if the heroes of mythology, the men, were imagined or, imagined as feminine, like Arjun in Mahabharata, having a feminine character for 1 year out of the 14 years. So all this, Indian cinema borrows so much from all these, all these myths, mythology. And I really enjoyed the responses to that question because it's very different from the way we look at it.
Anyone else with a thought or a question they want to chip in? Or maybe...
I have a slight observation, which is that it seems Charlie's Angels and the Old Guard, I haven't seen the Old Guard, I must watch it now, seem to be quite prominent in, noticing this paradigm shift in the way women action done by women is represented. This is my takeaway as a spectator from today's session.
I've got a similar takeaway. I need to watch more films. But I've got a great viewing list from this session now. Thank you, everyone. Krista and Fran, was there anything, as we sort of wrap up, was there anything that you would like to just pick up before we sort of wind down and close our session?
Fran?
I don't think so, but I'd just like to really say a massive thank you to everybody who contributed. Yeah, it was a pleasure all the way through. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will wish it good luck as it goes off into the world among the many cuts to library budgets.
Yeah, absolutely. And congratulations to Krista, Fran, and all the contributors on getting what looks like a brilliant book across the line. So yeah, I look forward to reading it, and as I say, watching many of the films that come with it. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ashley.
Okay.
Right.